sure we're live on Facebook. We should
Okay.
be, but yeah, we are.
All right.
Awesome, awesome. All right, let's do this, Chris. Let me just check. I mean, I think we're on here. Yes, we are.
We're
Awesome.
on. Okay,
Okay.
cool.
All right. I'm gonna pin you in a second because you're gonna be the center of attention right now. But before I do, first of all, welcome everyone to Chatting with Patty. Today's guest is Chris Lynam. He is my first Arthur Murray guest, and I've known him for many years. But I actually got to meet up with him years ago. We were part of an Arthur Murray training group team that went around the country training on sales training and dance training. And that's when I got to actually physically meet him for the first time. And immediately, especially you and Juan, you had this duo thing going on. You were awesome together. And the first thing that hit me is your gift for storytelling. And so when I saw you put together this book and you're in the process of still writing it,
Yeah.
almost finished with it, I thought, of course he would be. I mean, what better person to do this than Chris? So I'm honored to have you on this show.
Wow. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be on with you, Patty, and chatting with Patty. I think it's just such a great idea. And man, to be the first Arthur Murray person here is like, that means a lot. I really appreciate it. And I think that we really made a connection because at the time we both had the curliest hair in the room too. So
True. There's something about curly haired people, I guess. But let's get right to it. Chris, I love your description. You describe yourself as a father of five, a husband of one, and a needer of sleep. And which I could just imagine, especially while putting this book together. But ultimately, by day, you are a co-owner of 7 of the top Arthur Murray studios, and I think they're all in the Northern California. And now you recently opened up in Salt Lake City, and I think it was literally just moments, like a month or so before the pandemic, right?
it's crazy. Yeah. The way that it all came together was really serendipitous. We had one of our managers who'd been with us for a really long time. Her name is Brianne Thompson, and she messaged us and told us that she was going to need to move to Utah. And it was this, she wanted to give us 6 months of notice, and she was following her heart out there. And what she didn't know was that Daisy and I had won a trip to Park City, Utah in an auction, and we put it off. We're like, why would we need to go there? And what were we thinking? And we just went on this trip and we fell in love with Utah. We were like, it was like waking up and looking out the window, and it was like the scene from The Sound of Music. Like it was like that. And so we were like, this is perfect, and we should open a studio here. And so we'd been talking about it and had no idea of how we were going to do it, but we just knew at some point, like, there needs to be an Arthur Murray in Utah again. And then when she told us that, it was like this perfect moment. And yeah, and so it all came together. And so yeah, so they're doing great out there. Fortunately, Utah wasn't as hit as severely with the pandemic as we were in California. So but yeah, so we were already doing Zoom meetings with them anyway, so we're already kind of used to that sort of thing.
Okay, great, awesome. So let's get right to this book because obviously you're a very busy man. And I do believe in order to sort of birth an idea and actually make it come to life, it requires a lot of dedication. And that dedication is often fueled by a strong why. At least that's what I feel underneath
Mhm.
anybody that can follow through as much as you did, considering your reality. So I'm curious as to know what is your inspiration behind writing this book or your strong why or whatever that may be.
Yeah, that's a great question, man. Really good. Yeah, so for me, I think when I was really like looking back on just all the different, I always joke around. I say that I majored in college. I majored in changing my major. So I was constantly kind of dabbling in so many different things. But one thing that's kind of been at the core, kind of like the baseline of everything, has really just been my love of, like you said, like storytelling and writing. And so I was a journalism major for a while. I was a screenwriter for a while. And I've always kind of never shied away from speaking to people, and so that's kind of been there. And so I had started and stopped writing this book for so many times, and then through the course of it, I've been writing the Arthur Murray Live blog forever, And when I was looking at the word count, it just really punched me in the gut, because the word count on most of the blog articles is about like 1,000 to 2,000 words, give or take. And then the typical word count of a nonfiction book is like 50,000 words. And so when I looked at the difference, I was like, dude, that's like, how many blog articles is that? Oh my gosh. And so I think the why is really to be able to kind of follow through with something that I've always loved and sort of dabbled in for so long, but to finally just dive in. And I will say, on the record, I've been telling some of my friends this, that my comfort zone, even though I love it and I love the idea of it, my comfort zone was still screaming and trying to get me to stop. But my wife screams louder than my comfort zone. So
there you go. So she was kind of like your coach.
Yeah.
You better follow through with this, holding you accountable.
You literally couldn't have a better coach. Actually, one of our managers in San Francisco, Daisy, is out doing work in Hayward all week, and so I was asking them like, "Hey, how has it been going with Daisy over there?" And then Miguel over in San Francisco jumped in. He says, "Can I say something, even though I'm not over in Hayward right now?" But he said, "It's kind of like the house on The Wizard of Oz. You're in a house, but you're also in a tornado." That's describing Daisy to a T. So I was like, and I live in that house, and there's no better coach. I mean, she's been in my corner. She wants me. Oh, and
there she is. She's clothed. Oh,
she's got clothes on.
Sweetheart. Oh, hi, sweetheart.
This is Ava Rose. This is baby number 5.
Ava Rose, look at those dimples. I think every child has the dimples.
Yeah, that's a built-in thing. Yeah,
Lyman signature. Signature.
That's right. Yeah, so she just turned 2, and boy, does she have an opinion already on how things should go.
That's great. A leader right there.
Oh yeah, for sure. She is her a 2-year-old version of her mom. She's like, here's how it's going.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And to your point, so basically, I mean, obviously, as you're saying, Daisy was the one that was holding you accountable. Did you need help from anybody? And I'm asking you this because I know when I went through my process of putting together my book, I had a coach, and I actually needed someone to rip it apart. Like I hired a coach to say, show me everything that's wrong with it so that I can put the best version of me out there, because I have this inner critic that nothing's ever good enough. Yeah, so I don't know if you went through any of that process or still are. Like, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I still am. And really what it took was I just got a random email from this guy who was like a literary agent, and it was just one of those fluke kind of things. And so this whole thing started because he just, in the subject line, it says book deal with a question mark. And when I saw that, I was just, oh my God. And I showed it to Daisy, and then I tried to play it like really cool, but I was like inside, I was, jumping for joy, but I was still a little gun shy. And so when I talked to him and we did a sit down, actually, I will say that Daisy ended up booking the appointment. She got into my email and she responded and booked the appointment. Like, that's how hands-on she's been and how instrumental she's been in this whole thing. And so, but yeah, so talking to him, and then when I pitched this idea, his response was really positive. And that's when I felt like, okay, this could be, you're not just kind of drinking your own Kool-Aid and believe in your own hype, and so that was really beneficial. And then he's going to be kind of like the go-to person through this process. But I always have, from a writing standpoint, Daisy is always like my perfect audience too, because for me, for as much as I am a storyteller, Daisy is more like, just get to the point. Like, what's the bottom line, And so she's always like my way of kind of auditing. So if I can keep her kind of engaged in something, then I know like I'm kind of reaching an audience that's different from me, who's like more like the storyteller.
Right. It's funny because I'm a lot that way too, that when I bounce off ideas, I need that. What's the bottom line? And then try to create a story around it so that it really streamlines as much as possible. But that in itself, being able to tell a good story is an art. And you do have a gift of that, I have to say. And I'm glad she was there to kind of streamline it for you. That's awesome. So thank you. Curious with that in mind, has going through this process and writing change the way you even see yourself? Like, how has it shifted your growth in any way? Like, curious about that.
Yeah, I think that, gosh, there are all these moments too where, I think validation is always such an kind of like an underrated sort of, y- you know, box to check when it comes to anybody's career or their life pursuits or their passions. And I think, it's one of those things like how many great ideas die because internally somebody told themselves, oh, that's no one's ever gonna read that. No one's ever gonna watch this, or who needs a product like that? I mean, if you think of how just fluky some of the things like, how Spanx or Zumba or all these different things that kind of got started, and it was just all these weird things kind of happened all at once, and then you kind of got to that point where it got validated by people and they were like, you're onto something. And I think that's, to me, is the this process is definitely, it's been one of those things where you kind of question, am I worthwhile? Like, should I tell people about this? Should I just let people discover it? Um, but I think that this is definitely one of those things that hopefully will kind of silence that inner critic, which we know is, can sometimes be undefeated when it comes to us going outside our comfort zones. And but that's been a big part. Actually, the training team too that you mentioned earlier was a huge kind of launching point for me in terms of just where I felt like I could make a difference, and to get the validation from that was just monumental.
Yeah, yeah, good point with the validation there, 100%. And I don't know if the critic or the self doubt. I sometimes will say self doubt now instead of critic
Mm,
ever fully disappears. I think part of it is a check. It's a check and balances, to say something's not feel. Let me do everything I need to do so that I can walk into this with a certain amount of confidence and reassurance. So I've learned to make friends with the self doubt, as just as a way of what do I need to tweak within me in order to show up as confidently or as self-aware or as honorable as I can. So sometimes it's like a little check and balance for me. I don't know if you feel that way about it too.
yeah, I agree. I think it keeps you tethered. I think that sometimes people get so, sometimes we operate in such extremes, right? So we're either like completely defeated by self-doubt, or we're completely ignorant to some of the practical aspects of maybe what our idea or our venture is. And so finding that middle ground, it's kind of like being in the midway point of an exercise program. Like, you're not capable of really seeing, like, your little incremental growth, but that before picture definitely is great evidence that you've come a long way.
Okay. 100%. Cool. So let's get into the book more. One of
Sure.
your tagline there, or your subtitle, is high touch service for a touch free world. And obviously very poignant with where we are now. And the dance business was, one of the business that was greatly affected by this pandemic. And we're a kind of business where we rely a lot on the physical touch in order for people to feel the benefit of what it actually does for you. And
Mhm.
so it required a lot of studios to be so creative and to stay relevant in allowing people to feel the benefits of movement through virtual experience. So how did you notice, if we're talking about customer service during this time and in this reality, how did it change for you guys? Did it not? Like, can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm editing a video right now from a student from our San Francisco school that he's done almost I think 90% of his dance program has been digital. And he talked about just what it did, and as crazy as it seems, and it seems so it seems so opposite, but he said that one of the biggest things that he got through this process of digital lessons was a sense of community. Now, when you hear the word digital and sense of community in the same sentence, yeah, right. It just seems so contradictory. But what he said was, this could have been such a lonely time for me.
Mm.
And to know that I could still have someone to talk to on a regular basis, and to make myself a more confident and kind of like self-disciplined dancer. So I was more responsible for my movement, but also to be able to do parties with you guys online. really helped kind of save me through this process. And it's like stories like that where I just think of, like you said, how creative we had to get. I mean, think about how creative just schools had to get. I mean, look at, they just completely, you take a platform. I mean, we've been around since 1912. Schools have been around for, thousands of years, right? And so just the regular school system, how it kind of got turned on its ear, but how creative and more communicative the schools have been. As a parent, we've seen it's tough for us to kind of take the trainer hat off when we're interacting with our kids' teachers, and so you might see something where you go, could you, when you deliver this information, could you just maybe kind of give us like a cushion first, and then, you want to maybe critique it a little bit, and to see how much more animated and expressive and communicative they've all become has just been, I think, a real great advantage just to every teaching industry, and I think going forward, whether it's hybrid or it's back to in person, but just think of how much better they've all gotten in the process. I think it's great.
Yeah, great. So with that in mind, let's go into, because I don't have the book, so I couldn't read it, and I'm anxiously waiting for it to be delivered.
Yeah, me too.
I'm curious, can you give us a snippet or two about some of the topics or concepts within the book so that we can have a sneak preview?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that is so big on the book and the concept behind it is it's called the Choreography of Customer Service, because there are times where we can have these situations where we're sort of freestyling, like we're just kind of winging it. Like, for those of you that don't know, I'm sure that everybody that's watching this right now knows what a great dancer Patty is, and that anybody could pick her up on the dance floor and you could follow it and make it look fantastic. Bob Long gave you a shout out in that video too, was so awesome. And but that's great freestyle dancing. That means that you've got someone who is ready to go on the drop of a hat to be able to get up and to perform. And we don't have people in the service industry that are at that skill level when it comes to communication skills. And so for everybody that's ever gotten better at freestyle kind of dancing, it started with choreography. It started with learning fundamentals and moves and sequences, became kind of like going from words to sentences to paragraphs to poetry. I stole that from Bill Jacobson, by the way. Bill Jacobson. So when you kind of follow that trajectory, what usually happens in most organizations, we're fortunate with Arthur Murray that we do ongoing training, but there's so many service organizations where service kind of ends when their training manual ends. And then after that, everyone's kind of winging it. And we've all experienced these like customer service fails that kind of leave us with a lot to be desired. And so one of the things that is covered in there, there's going to be a lot of stories, whether it's me taking lessons in other activities. But there's one that really is going to be kind of like a central theme here. But there's a story, and I should say some of the tools. One of the tools that is going to be included is the backstory. And when you understand someone's backstory, you kind of are arming yourself with more and more information that can help you kind of like choose like the right path for somebody. And so like a good example of this is if you imagine like the more backstory is kind of like pulling back on like a bow and arrow. And the more that you can pull back and create, not, this is like positive tension, but the more that you're creating that potential energy, then the more accurate you can hit the bullseye with whatever your recommendation is when it comes out and when the arrow releases. And too often what's happening is that people are playing darts when they could be playing like with a bow and arrow. And I don't know about you, but if I had to choose one weapon to help me in like a pinch, if there was a bear coming at me, actually if it was a bear, I think just sprinting would be my best bet. But I think an arrow is always going to be so much more effective than just darts. And so a dart doesn't have as much potential energy. It's just a little flick of the wrist. And that to me is kind of like nothing better than maybe an untrained golf teacher or someone that works at a kiosk at the mall that's just like, hey, pretty lady, let me curl your hair. You're like, back off, and that's darts to me. And where people that have really great training can be actually kind of pulling back on the bow. So A funny story I'll tell you really quick is where the backstory was kind of missing is I supplied this golf teacher with plenty of backstory. He had all of the tools necessary for me to be his best student ever, for him to be the best teacher in the world. I looked him up because he was the most skilled, he had the highest ranking of all the golf teachers in all of Northern California. So I was like, okay, I'm going to him because someone that we both know, John Kimmons, had invited me to go golfing with him at a private club after the franchisee convention. And I freaked out because I am a bad golfer. And so, guys like Ingvar Gearson and Troy Baton, these guys are all really good. They called my driver in my golf bag the house killer, because every time I hit with that club, I would hit a house with the golf ball. So that's like how bad we're talking, okay? Patty, I can't stress this enough. As good as I might be with storytelling, I am the opposite with golf. So I needed to get lessons, and I wanted to this is going to be great, get a chance to golf with the president of Arthur Murray. So I go to this guy and I tell him my entire story. I tell him the house killer story, I tell him who I'm golfing with, how bad I am. And then he takes me through the motions, and he's really just sort of a body. And he doesn't ask me any more questions about why that would be important to me and why I would want to impress him, nothing. And when he gets to his final presentation, he points to the sign on the board, and he's like, so if you want to get any more golf lessons, there's some of the packages that we have right there. And that was like after I give him this softball for him to hit, right? And he goes, he's just kind of standing there, and it literally, I feel like he's like some like deadbeat dad that's spending time with a kid that he doesn't really care about. Like, that's how I felt. Like, I felt like I was wasting this guy's time. And I was like, so would it be better if I bought more lessons? Like, is there like an incentive for me to maybe do 10 instead of just one? He's like, yeah, whatever. If you want to, you can do. And everything was at that energy level. And so I was like, I'm just going to get the 10 then. And I'm trying to get some sort of response from him. And he's like, yeah, okay. And literally it's that the entire time. Nothing is moving the needle on this guy. And I'm like, oh my God. So then moving forward, I'm like, okay, so I pay for the 10 lessons. I was like, yeah, I got it. And no reaction. And I was like, so when should I come in next? Because, I got the house killer, right? So I got to, and he's like, yeah, just go ahead and practice at home. You can just kind of hit the driving range and just come back when you feel like it. And I'm just thinking, does this guy want me to never get better at golf? What's his deal? And so it was nothing but that. So I'm like, so I'll come in next week. How about same time next week? And the guy's just nothing, not moving the needle. And so I go in for my next lesson, and I had driven literally 90 minutes out of my way to go see this guy. And I get up early, I go to my next lesson, and the guy, I was like, all right, are we getting ready to work on that house killer? The guy didn't even remember who I was. And he's like, let's start with this bucket of balls. And it was almost like Groundhog Day, where we repeated the exact same lesson a second time around. And then I never went back after that. So I have 8 lessons on the table over there, or 9, I don't know. I'm gonna call that guy out in the book. But I think it's moments like that where that's the area where I think there's so much opportunity for people in the service industry, is that you can do the work that is expected. And it's that final step. And this guy, there was a lot of work that could have been included there. But for so much of us, it's not that we ever are trying to give bad customer service. I think that what it is that we give 75% of expected customer service, and we're missing that 25% that turns somebody from somebody that's using your product to becoming an ambassador of your product. And that's the thing that I think is gonna be the prime opportunity with a book like this, and to be able to have something that kind of extends the lifespan of training. And, if you sell smoothies for a living, or you're a golf teacher, God, I hope that golf teacher reads this book. So whatever the industry, but to be able to take something that we understand in such a high touch environment in Arthur Murray, that to be able to extend that into other industries, especially now more than ever.
And to your point with that, do you think, because when you're talking to me about the backstory as one of the sort of topics that you discuss in the book, as you were describing all of that, to me, there's an underlining value of you as a person being curiosity, having curiosity as a high value, being curious about another human being, like really truly saying, I'm curious about you, because whether you take these lessons with me or not, if I actually become curious about who you are, I know that I'm gonna enjoy this experience, even if it's just for today. Like there's something underneath that. And I say this because I describe, when I talk to a lot of women within Sensuality Secrets, they often get frustrated with dating and being in the dating scene, and how, you know, they're asking questions and how it can become an interrogation, or how it comes, or how one person or the other has the inability to actually try to stretch that, to dive a little deeper. Do you, are there things that you teach, or allow people to notice how to do that? How do you become that person that is able to stretch that? Or do you
Yeah.
just throw questions out there because I'm supposed to, but in the end they're kind of going everywhere, and you're not getting any better to getting to the backstory? You're just kind of following a sequence of questions without really understanding the other human being. Can you give us an idea of that?
Absolutely. Well, I think when you talked, your opening question about the why, I think is really big. And I think that in this case, the why for us is using another story here. But if you imagine, if you watched The Karate Kid, like just the second half of the movie or just the final scene of the movie, and you didn't know any backstory whatsoever, you might be like, that guy just kicked that guy in the face and people are cheering for him. And is he a bad guy or a good guy? Like the reason why that moment might, I mean, it chokes me up every time I watch it, but is because you've seen the progression of the character and you know the backstory, you know that he was coming from this defeated place, and then he kind of turned it around. His mentor became passionate about his training because he saw him get defeated. He saw him get beat up, and his bike got junked and he got thrown against the fence and that whole thing. And Mr. Miyagi came in and took him under his wing, even though he'd never really wanted to aspire to become a karate teacher again. But he did that because something ticked the boxes for him, where he saw somebody who had the chip stacked against him. He saw the backstory in action. So for me, when we're training, one of the things that we talk about is like, we can't just pretend to be passionate about somebody being there if you haven't asked any questions and you haven't kind of peeled back some of the layers of why they're there. And the moment that you do, what I kind of give them is this kind of mission of, you can then be, you know, Red from Rocky, or you can then be Mr. Miyagi from The Karate Kid. You can find a reason to get fired up and passionate about somebody's story once we've done the investigative work to figure out why they're there. And then the more that we understand, the more it's really, you know, it's not necessarily just for the comfort level of the student, because sometimes asking questions and answering questions like that can feel a little uncomfortable. But the more that we understand, the closer we're getting to that gold mine of passion, where we can now personally feel like a mentor and kind of care about the final product. And so I love using this thing. It's called the 4 Ps. And so we use people, place, past, and purpose. And using those kind of four areas, when we're asking questions, the idea is it's kind of like we're digging through this mine. You know, I love, you know, in, you know, How to Win Friends and Influence People, they talk about, or I was thinking Grow Rich, when he talked about being 3 feet from gold. And so when we're working on this with our staff, when it comes to us asking questions, that we kind of give them that story of, are you quitting 3 feet from gold? You know, how many mines in the gold rush out here in California, how many mines were abandoned by average miners, and then better miners came in and bought them on pennies on the dollar, and then were able to mine huge veins of gold because they were only 3 feet from the payoff. And so when it comes to questions, sometimes it's the tough work of digging through and kind of getting past those layers of awkwardness. But when we ask questions like, you know, people questions, instead of saying, you know, if I was playing this out with you, Patty, I could, the sort of 75% version of that question might be like, hey, does anybody know that you're taking dance lessons? And then you might be like, no. Right. And then I just kind of go back to my 75%. I go, oh, okay, cool. Well, let's go back and do the box step, you know, and then I'm just left with no information, and I'm abandoning that mine. Versus if I turn this into, you know, Patty, if there was one person that you could pick out in your life that that you would want to have see you dance, like just out in public, who would that person be and what would their response be like?
Wow. That's a big turnaround there, just in the way you asked the question. Yeah.
Right. And so just by doing that, to kind of turn this into a conversation topic where it doesn't get shot down by saying, do you, but if you had to pick, just by doing that one little switch, turns it into something that becomes a conversation point. It becomes kind of like we've cut through a lot more of the rubble. We've gotten closer to the gold. So that way I can now kind of tap into my passion for that person's story. And I think without that, we're sort of kind of going through the motions. We're hoping that our product just makes them raving crazy fans, but a lot of times it's the people first, right? And I think that's really the ticket.
Yeah, and I mean, first of all, that was a nice little nugget there, because as soon as you went into if you could, I went into a part of my brain that where there was possibility. So I'm like, if I could. And so right away I'm looking for, what do you mean if I could what? If I could what? So I physically got a little bit more excited because I went to a place of imagination versus just listening to answer the question. So just by putting that ahead of the sentence,
Mm-hmm.
immediately changed the way my brain kind of got triggered as compared to before. So that's cool. So do you do a lot of these type of exercises regarding people, places, past, and purpose?
Yep, absolutely. And we always say that there's the fifth P, and maybe there's gonna be a sixth one, but it's perspective. And when you can't have a true perspective, sometimes we are, like those miners, they're walking away from the gold and they're saying there's nothing more you can find there. It is a dead mine. And so that's a limited perspective. That's somebody that left it and abandoned that mine. And so we always say that you don't really have a true perspective unless you've done the work in these other P's. Like if you've done, people, place, past, and purpose, then now you're unlocking perspective. You have a genuine perspective on what this can do for them. You have a genuine perspective on why they need this in their lives. And too often what happens is that we're always looking for some way to justify any sort of result that doesn't go our way. Like we are a justification machine. And I always say, like, that voice inside your head has a marketing budget that's unlimited, and so it will create a marketing campaign on top of a marketing campaign as to why that person never needed your service. And you'll tell yourself, oh yeah, well, I know that they just don't like this kind of stuff, or I know they're going to come back in the fall. How many times have we heard that? Or they're on that vacation, they're going on that safari for their honeymoon. And so we convince ourselves that we've done all of the requisite work, and yet we've left so much on the table. And so many times with staff, we have situations where we, unfortunately, sometimes people with the most limited perspective have the biggest opinions. And that comes from just abandoning the mine early.
Wow. So I love the four P's, and eventually 5 and 6. Before I go into something else, I want to ask you if there was something else for being able to spot when they're having a conversation. So because I have my process of doing things too, because I talk about flirting, and I tell women,
Cool.
I coach them through my acronym is ACEs, right? On appreciation, commonality, elevating the environment, and then self-expression. So I have a way of going through that, and there's sort of specific ways to, once the conversation gets started, pay attention to these things. So I'm curious if there's ways that you have, once the first if happens and they're going there, do you continue drilling into the mind? And if so, is there another layer of questions or step that you offer, or what you're listening for? Curious.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that is, I think one thing like we talked about is, validation is always important, and I think a third party is always really helpful. Let's say, for example, if I'm going to be a very responsible person and I go out to a bar and I'm with some friends and I know that I'm going to have a couple of cocktails, like I'm going to do the responsible thing and I'm going to create a system of rules with my friends, and I'm going to give my keys to this person, and I'm going to say, now, if I start to do this, can you please escort me out of the building if it was a real big problem? But you create these, when we have this, we have these moments of lucidity that where we're totally aware of all of our surroundings before we kind of get ourselves into these like dicey situations. And so we create those rules before we start playing the game. And so one of the things that will happen, this is kind of a dumb analogy, but every now and then as a kid, you probably grew up with somebody in your neighborhood where you were playing a game, and then midway through the game, if they were losing, they changed the rules and they said, well, this is how we do it in our house. Like, the car is base and the tree is base. We're like, no. The tree was base and you're out. They're like, no, this is my house. And so I think sometimes what it is creating like a network and sort of a safety net for our team when they're trying something new. No different from if you were going to try anything new for the first time, if you were going to get your driver's license or do, tightrope walking or something, you're gonna have all these safety measures built in ahead of time, and you're gonna have someone that's gonna coach you through that. And so having a third party is really helpful. So kind of taking it like, let's say in the flirting scenario, I haven't gone through. Fortunately I don't. I have a wife that flirts with me just fine, but
we're not, 5 kids later, yeah, it's working.
we're trying to cut back in the flirting is what we're really doing. So, but I think, imagine how powerful that is if someone were to then compliment that person in front of them to somebody else. Like if you said, gosh, don't you love how he wears his jacket, or, like if you were doing something to a third party, how validating that becomes. And so we try to create these kind of checkpoints. So if we're trying some of these things, that we've got somebody there to be able to bounce off some of the things that we found, but also to kind of helps validate it. And they kind of sort of take the information, and now it's not just locked in with just one person. And I think that's a really powerful way to then make it more conversational, but also so that way you have someone there that's got to be there for quality control too. So that way nobody kind of goes on a rant and then starts putting somebody on the witness stand.
Right. Have you noticed since this whole, I think in California now you have people in the studio and they're all wearing masks, I presume. Yeah. Did you notice has that changed the way people have conversations, or perhaps those nonverbal cues are not as obvious, or perhaps more obvious? Are people paying attention differently since the whole mask thing has shown up?
Yeah, it's tricky on two fronts. On the for our staff, we were doing a meeting the other day, and one of our teachers said something that was absolutely brilliant. Dustin in Redwood City, you had a brilliant moment there. I loved it. But he said, we were talking about ways that we can give service to our students and some of the things that are really important. And he said, well, we have to give them eye contact. Because we actually can't give them anything else anymore. And I was like, whoa, like eye contact now is like the new smile, like, and they talk about smizing, and so, but I think with a mask on, that's definitely something that's become so much more important and relevant. But also too, like, I think in the past when you had the physical aspect, you maybe, especially in, in our industry, you had people who are such incredible dancers and they're so gifted physically that kind of spoke for itself. And now with like digital or even in person, if that's lacking, animation or voice inflection, how important those things are so much more relevant and important now than they ever have been. And then on the other side would be as a trainer and as an owner to be able to give meetings now through Zoom exclusively is definitely a challenge too, just to be able to keep the body language there. I'm finding that I'm saying, can everybody give me your whole face? And that means like, give me your face in the screen now. Like, I don't want everyone like checking their nails and, and so that's now like visual digital body language is so incredibly important. So
yeah, I noticed that with some of the Zoom coachings that I've been doing or workshops, that it's required more of me because everything is so flat and one dimensional that I feel like for me to be able to make sure they feel or sense the information, I have to do more, like
Yeah.
louder, higher, lower, come in, go back, like
Yeah.
create different depths, everything to just try to keep someone entertained and engaged, not just giving information. Compared to before, was easier when you were in a room. And to your point about the eye contact, 100%, I noticed that I'm like, this is all I got, and I'm looking for like an eyebrow. Are you staying in? Is it? It's unbelievable the difference there. But yeah, I think it does. I actually find it's probably made us more attentive to nonverbal, because you can't just take someone and move them around. Like now you have to. Is it okay for you to step in? Is it not? Do they need their space? Are they comfortable? Like there's so much more that you need to be observant of just because of this, that I think it's heightened everybody's attention on the nonverbal skills anyways. I
Oh
think
yeah.
it's that.
Well, and I think too, just, one of the things that kind of makes Arthur Murray such a special place is that, everybody walks in and feels like, like cheers, like everybody, you're gonna call everyone's name out, and how much more important that is now that we don't have the physical touch element. And so we're kind of going back to some of these things that I remember training on when we first took over the Hayward studio, and kind of changing the culture, and now we're doing the same thing because the culture has gone through this massive shift, right? And so we don't have all of our superpowers available to us, and it's like Batman has half of his utility belt now, and so he's just left with 12 other things. I don't know, but yeah. And so because of that, we've got to learn how to be really resourceful. And I think yeah, body language, eye contact, and then voice inflection have never been at such a premium.
Yeah. So before I go on to sort of my closing questions, I just want to let everybody know, hi, Laura. Hi, Chris, on Facebook, Area 4, and have enjoyed reading many of Chris's blogs. This is a student, Laura Antos.
Okay.
She wants to say that to you. She's
Thanks,
enjoyed many
Laura.
of your blogs. And if there's anybody else that may have a question or comment, please put it on the Facebook. We're coming to the end, and I always appreciate, or anybody here on Zoom, if you have a question, please do so. I'd like to ask you, and I'm going to do my best, because here's the if question for you, Chris.
Oh yeah. Okay, I'm ready.
I haven't practiced this, so now I love this if question, but I'm going to kind of go on the fly. But I hear, if you could dream big with this book, like if it were to be something that you never thought could happen, and it becomes this amazing thing where not just Arthur Murray people start reading it, like corporations outside of Arthur Murray, like what would that look like for you? What would happen if you could allow yourself to go there?
Wow. It's tough because part of me wants to go there, like, oh, this is so gonna be good, and then the other part, the majority of me is saying like, shut up, you just, like stop doing that, and I think so. I love that question, and thank you for asking me that. And so giving myself full permission to just kind of think really big on this, to me, I think I know for certain I would have these moments where I would probably go into every bookstore in my city, and just probably, I would have date nights at bookstores with Daisy. Like we would just go and take pictures and caress the books and maybe sign copies. Like I saw a couple of authors did that, where they went in and secretly signed copies of their books, and I like left them there. And I would love to do like stuff like that. And I've gone to some keynotes from authors. Like I got a chance to hear Chip Heath from the Switch book, who spoke at the Dan Heath spoke at our franchisee convention. I got a chance to go to the eBay campus with my mom and hear him speak and do this presentation on his book. And that was like this moment where I was like, I would love to do that. Like I would love for people to know that beneath like the spray tan and the glitter and the rhinestones and this crazy thing that we call a career, that beneath that we have been operating covertly as the greatest customer service organization in the world. I really believe that. Like I think that, and this is crazy, and I love this place I'm about to mention, and I feel almost like this is sacrilegious, but I think we're even better than Disneyland in terms of the way that we give service. And here's why. Who goes to Disneyland inherently feeling like they're going to hate it and it's going to be a horrible experience. Nobody. Everybody goes to Disneyland knowing parents go because it's going to make them feel like a kid again. Kids go because there's rides and great food. But our activity is something that people have this, choreophobia is an actual phobia of dancing in public. Like, we're dealing with people that have a phobia of an experience, and they are dead set in this firm belief that everybody it's pervaded itself for however long, that they'd never be any good at dancing. And somehow we're able to convince people that there's a possibility, and our structure and the way that we communicate and the team we create and the safety that we create for people to feel like they can dream big about what they're capable of on the dance floor. I would love to have this book kind of be the lighthouse for that. And I think that that's me, like, dreaming really big, that, for more people, even if it didn't turn into everybody, like, suddenly, I mean, I would love for it to turn into a big dance movement and stuff, but even for us to get the cred that I think that we really deserve in the Arthur Murray organization, I think would be really special.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, if there's something that we get is how to make people comfortable as they walk in, because there's usually one, if there are a couple, there's usually one person that's being pulled into the scenario more than the other one. And if they're alone, I remember having students come to my studio that would purposely take lessons like late at night when no one was around, because they wanted to make sure no one would see them, even if they didn't know anybody that was there. Or they had to surprise, like, all the secrecy behind it on many occasions. And sometimes it was to surprise somebody, and sometimes it was just to actually surprise themselves and see that they can actually do this. So they'd rather not let anyone in their circles know until, but to your point, that big question, once you knew how to dance, if you had someone that you'd like to show
Mm-hmm.
the skill to. So that was huge. So do you think, in closing, is this a book that can help even companies that are non-dance studios, that is non-Arthur Murray? Like, is it, anybody could read this and feel like they can gain from their service industry?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And my, there's probably, there's going to be a full disclosure, something at the, in the opening, about that this book is not designed to teach people dance moves, but there's so many great lessons from what we do and the way that we do it that I think every company can benefit from it. I got a chance to do some speaking engagements at some schools. I even did a training using some of these principles. My mom has a music school, so I got a chance to talk to all these music teachers about some of the same things that are going to be included in this book, and to change the perspective, and for them to be able to see what they were capable of and the responsibility that they had as mentors, as music teachers, and how in some cases you kind of operate based on what the history says you should do, instead of kind of reformatting and forming your own kind of culture of something that could be even better. And, I think every single industry out there, whether they deal with face-to-face interactions and, and service-oriented things, is still the people business. I mean, there's going to be things in here about how I use some of these same things to actually get my wife to say yes to me. I actually couldn't convince her to say yes to me, but how I proposed to her was actually rooted in a lot of the training, and how that's such a stark comparison to the way that I talked to girls before I met my eventual wife. And so there's a lot of really fun anecdotes and stories. And that's one thing that Daisy, when we were talking through this whole process, and she was like, there better be stories. Like, you better have stories in there, because that's who, I don't want it just to be. And I was like, yeah, okay, there's going to be stories. And she's just been wonderful through this process. But I firmly believe that the book is really going to be something that can take whatever the onboarding process is in any industry, and it's going to add this high touch human element, that even if it's just service through an email or a computer screen, to be able to truly connect. We're not in this stage of business life where we have a really high margin for error anymore. We've got this really low margin of error, and we've got to be really on point. And we owe it to the people that are trusting us as they're venturing gradually back into the marketplace, everybody could easily stay home. They could easily just order online. They could stay in and continue to be isolated. But especially if we're talking about in-person experiences, I think we owe it to our end user to be on our very best game, and, not just to bring back business as usual, but, to actually use service to surpass what our usual was.
Wow. Chris, I want to deeply thank you for being part of this. Your brilliance was felt even through this. To your point, I really felt more energized after our conversation with you. So thank you. No,
Oh,
truly,
thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And everybody else. Oh, wow. Here, another person, Chris Karmizian says, Ciao, love the interview. Working at KPMG, one of our struggles is improving mental health while in a virtual environment. Any advice on how we can feel part of a team or feel more engaged?
Oh, that's great. Can I take that?
Yeah, let's go right
Okay,
to it.
great. What was this person's name?
Chris, he used to work for me.
Oh, Chris. Okay. Hi, Chris.
Yeah.
Hey, so I think in terms of just overall health, for everybody and feeling so detached, I didn't even think that it would be at the scale it was at in terms of just how everyone was feeling. I was kind of really just focusing more on how I was feeling, and I was excited to get back to work when we started bringing everybody back in. And then I watched this scene unfold with our team that just took my breath away in a really positive way. But it was as if everybody was coming back. When you see those soldiers coming through the airport and being greeted by their families, that's how everybody was greeting each other. And it was this really powerful thing. And I think that when it comes to us interacting on digital, like, to be able to create a sense of community has never been more important. And I think that you've got to make sure, for your group, we talk a lot about empathy and how you've got to be rooted in a place where you can help somebody who's in a jam and not just jump into the jam with them. And so I think what we've been doing is consistently, just to keep everybody kind of rooted in the right place, is that we do a steady dose of leadership training where we pull in a great speaker. We just did a Simon Sinek, we did Leaders Eat Last today, talking about the importance of that, just so that way it's kind of giving us this steady dose of almost like vitamin enriched material to improve who we are, so that way we can be the best version of ourselves kind of moving forward. And I think that thinking about your particular situation, I'm not sure how often you guys are able to actually meet in person or if it's just exclusively digital. But I think one thing that will also help is to do something that gives people a chance to do something creative, and to give them some of that leeway to be able to give them a platform, gives everybody a chance to feel like they're kind of rallying around a cause. And so what we've done is we're employing a lot of, we'll do a quick breakout session, and you have 10 minutes and you're going to put together these 3 things and you give us your opinion, and then you're going to come back and you're going to give us a short presentation on that. And I think when you give someone a chance to feel like they're a part of something that's bigger than who they are, I think that's where people feel, like we talked through the course of this interview, they feel that validation. And they feel like a sense of belonging. Even if they can't physically be there, they feel like they're doing something. Nobody wants to feel like they're just, a background actor. No one wants to feel like they're just could be replaced by a cardboard cutout. You want to feel like you're making some kind of contribution. And so I think even if it's a contribution, if everybody did a breakout meeting, you got 10 minutes to find the next TED Talk that we're going to put in our series on leadership, and everybody goes and they get together in their own Kindle Pocket things. And I found this one, and they do a little presentation, something that allows them to be creative and to feel like they're moving the needle in terms of belonging, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you for that, Chris. And to add to that too, like depending on how often people meet, but I have noticed that sometimes we take, especially if you're in the corporate situation, there tends to be a lot of meetings. And when you're not surrounded in a room, it's easy to almost by habit shut things off because you're multitasking. And I think that's probably one of the worst things one can do is be in a meeting and do something else, as much as sometimes it's necessary. I don't know that world very well, but I do know that it's disengaging. And
Hmm.
so do you want to be the kind of person that maybe shows up in a different physicality, even within the Zoom meeting? I mean, we talked about it briefly, but when I'm giving a coaching lesson, I'm going upside down inside just to try to make that experience a little bit more visceral, to some degree. But to your point, have creating, maybe being somebody that's in charge of that perhaps too, to say, how do we make this more engaging and more fun and more innovative, because this is all we have. Like, what
Hmm.
can we do? Maybe even being creative yourself in your own workspace.
Well, and I think just to piggyback off of that too, I think a lot of times as leaders, what we can do is we feel like we're doing everybody a favor by shielding our team from all of the challenges that we have on our plate. And I think that what a leader will do is they'll share some of the challenges and then kind of present that to the team. Like, here's what we're up against. And when the team knows what they're up against, then then now that's somebody that's kind of transitioned from just an authority figure to being more like a coach. And in sports, you can see the scoreboard, you kind of know what you're up against, but they still say we're not out of it yet. And I think the more that leaders, because there isn't a scoreboard in business other than just maybe end of year metrics and quarterly, revenue and stuff. But when you have some sort of thing that you can, here's what we're up against. We're up against this feeling of detachment in our work group. And so, like, we need to rally together and let's workshop this together and let's come up with some crazy ideas, and we're leaving nothing on the table. Like, just put it all out there. And I think being willing to do that, I think, says a lot. It's almost like being a really accomplished dancer and to be willing to say, hey, can you give me some feedback on how I can get better? And that can be an ego hit to somebody who wants to protect how good they are. But I think it's, in the big picture, it says a lot about who they are.
Wow, beautiful. Well, Chris, thank you. I think that's the end of the questions for now. Thank you. I don't want to take more of your time than necessary, but you were awesome. Thank you so much for giving of your time, sharing your knowledge. I'm so excited to read your book. I recommend everybody to check it out. I will add a link to this on Facebook and send emails to everybody where they can purchase the book on order.
Yeah.
And then you'll find out, you'll get regular emails. And if you follow him on Facebook, you're always giving us updates on what's going on with the book and where you're at with that, right?
Yeah. And so I'm in this right now. I am in a contest to see how many, if I can get that. It's a pre-order campaign right now, and the platform I'm on is called Publishizer. And essentially, what they do is they take authors that have not been discovered yet, and then they get them connected with big publishing companies. And so the goal is for me to be able to break 500 pre-orders of this book. And then I get connected with their full array of publishers. And then they all, I don't know if they have a death match to see who gets to have my book. So, but through this campaign, so through November 12th, there are, just like a Kickstarter campaign, there are some exclusive experiences. So if you wanted me to come out and do, if this is for like an Arthur Murray studio, or even for a business outside of Arthur Murray, if you wanted an on-site kind of team building thing, where we talk about leadership through some dance moves, that's definitely something that's available. There's different things like Zoom coachings. There's going to be things where I'm in your school for multiple days, and also, like, you get to babysit my kids, and I forgot what else I put in there. Babysitter for a day. Actually, I would need to pay you a lot of money for that. Patty, I think you could do it. You could totally.
I could. I'd love it. We'd be dancing all day.
And I'm sure whatever hair products you're using would work with all of my kids, no problem.
That's it. We'd have a hair day, a dance day, the whole thing. We'd knock it out. Absolutely. And we'd videotape it all. And they would be teaching me a lot, I'm sure, especially if they're even in the surroundings of all of your meetings. I'm sure all of that is spewing into their mind and their energy, and they're going to, turn into these brilliant little girls and boys.
I hope so. But I think, yeah, they all have, what's funny is they all have a temperament of a different type of dancer. So, like, we've got one of our daughters is like a total Latin dancer, and she's wild and crazy. And then another one is like a standard dancer, and she's very got
Ways.
poised and very calm, and so it's just really, it's so cool. It's the best job ever.
Oh, wonderful. Once again, thank you. You heard it, everyone, how you can purchase the book and pre-order that. Thank you again for your time. This was wonderful. And I look forward to crossing paths with you in real life soon, hopefully.
Yes, I know, Patty, it's been way too long, and we are going to do, I would love for you to be at the book launch party, whenever that may be. It has to be I'm hoping we can be we'll be in a no mask zone by that point, but yeah, would love to have you out for that when we do it.
Absolutely. I'd love to come. All right. Thanks, Chris. Give my best to Daisy.
Okay.
And see you soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Patty. Bye,
Ciao,
everybody.
ciao.